Okay, God, here are the options. And I think God guides us as we move forward. We don't just sit there, okay, I'm waiting for God to, is it door number one, door number two, door number three? It's sort of like, no, we get moving, right? Easier to steer the car when it's in motion, kind of deal. You get moving, and then God directs as we go.
I usually tell people God's will for your life is not to ask me this question. And then...
Hi, I'm Bryan Threlkeld, host of Down to Earth Theology Matters. And today we are continuing our study in the book of James, and we are at James chapter 4, beginning in verse 13. I'm joined today by Dr. Jason Peters. He's the Greek professor at the Grace School of Theology, and he's been along for the whole journey, right? Great to see you. Here we go. Let's dive right in. If you've missed the prior episodes, you can always go back and check out. We've done James 1:1 all the way through James 4:12, and today we're picking it up in verse 13. I'm going to read the passage and then toss it over to you.
Great.
All right, here we go. James says, "Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will travel to such and such city and spend a year there and do business and make a profit. Yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring, what your life will be. For you are like vapor that appears for a little while, then vanishes. Instead, you should say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. But as it is, you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. So it is sin to know the good and yet not do it." All right, so here we have it, 13 to 17. It's a short section, but I think we can unpack a lot here. So Jason, take it away.
Yeah, and the reason why we decided to stop here is, first, you see kind of this structural device, right? It's like when people ask, well, Jason, how do we outline a text if we're going to just study it or do a Bible study or even preach it? And the Bible itself gives you structural cues and markers. James uses a lot of the grammar term is evocative, but it's basically just how to address a particular person in a particular way. So he says brothers a lot. But here he has this extra kind of comment like come now or go now, because it's ago is really to like go or lead or guide. But it's probably an idiom, and it's just a way of breaking up that 4:1 through 12 that was pretty thick, and like, okay, let's take a deep cognitive breath and go, okay, now we're going to move on. So now there's this group of people saying this. So one thing that you and I talked about, off the air, so to speak, is James is highly situational. So he has information, and this is what we just have to know about these texts. They are situational communication or situational letters. So James has some kind of information already where he knows that this is the kind of thing that people are talking about. And he wants to correct it because he wants them to do what? To live godly lives, humble lives, and with the wisdom that God gives them, that, by the way, they should be asking for, because, oh, by the way, their life is going to be full of various trials. And, oh, by the way, that's so that their faith would be tested and refined in such a way that they can be those people when their life is over to receive that crown that Jesus has for them, for those that have been loving him, aka deeply committed to him and what he has us doing. And so here's the issue. There's a group of people saying something like this, today or tomorrow we're going to travel to such and such city, and we're going to be there for a year so that we can buy and that we can sell, or that we can gain. In other words, we can conduct business and make a profit. Now, is that a bad thing to do?
No. And in fact, there were those types of traveling merchants in the first century. And I'm assuming here there were Jewish merchants that did that. So I'm assuming here, based on the context of the book, these are Christian Jews who have that particular profession. And he's going to address something very specific. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't take a year off and I'm going to, fly over here or travel over here and do business for a year. Seems a little odd to us, man, but that wasn't unusual, that they would actually be away from their family for an extended period of time. And it was a way for them to really cash in too. It's kind of like, okay, I'm going to go work on the oil rigs out in the Gulf of Mexico, something like that. It's hard work. It's long. I have to stay out there, but man, I'm going to come back and have a big chunk of change. So that's kind of the equivalent here, I think.
Yeah. And it's, in the context, we know the problem with this. And I think it's a perennial problem for a lot of people is we make plans, but lots of times when we make plans, they are self-focused. They're for benefit of self. Even if we're in a church body that has people that are in need, we keep planning all the things that we are going to do with our life because it's all about us.
Yeah.
And then, and I think maybe James kind of has that idea in his mind because one thing that I think he's doing is he's alluding to Proverbs 27:1 that's actually just says, don't boast about tomorrow, for you don't know what the day would bring. So he's alluding to this wisdom literature.
Yep.
Here in 14 is like, hey, you don't know what tomorrow's going to bring, even what your life is going to be like. For you are a vapor that appears for a little while and then vanishes.
Ooh, wow. That's some terminology right there.
Yeah, and this may be alluding to Psalm 102:3, that where the psalmist says that my days pass away like smoke. Same word. Can be vapor, smoke. There's some good jokes there somewhere, but we'll leave for another time. But what's the point? Again, he's cage rattling. Does he actually think their life is just a little smoke in the air and then it's gone and then there's no purpose? No, this is like Ecclesiastes kinds of language.
Exactly.
Right. So what's the point? What is he getting at? Well, I think 15 tells us because he corrects it, right? So, those saying, instead you should say, if the Lord wills. And I love the Greek construction here because it uses this little preposition anti, which is like to take the place of something. So in the place of what you just said, here's what you should say. If the Lord should will or wills, we will live and do this or do that. In other words, if the Lord desires it, we want to be a part of it.
Yeah, we use that term, God willing, I'll do this. God willing, I'll do that.
Yeah, and the way the Greek works is the author, from how he structures the actual sentence, put a little kind of emotional emphasis on the word wills. So it wouldn't be if the Lord wills, because we know that, but it's kind of like if the Lord wills, like if it's got to be his desire. It's got to be what he wants. Now, I don't know about you, but for me, I've had a number of people ask me, Jason, what do you think God's will is for my life?
That's a big question.
Yeah, I mean, I tell them, to pay your pastor's car payment and mortgage, set me up with it's
air-conditioned doghouse, just little things.
That's right.
That's the Lord's will.
So what would you say to somebody who kind of wants to know the path that they think maybe God has set for them?
Yeah, that's a huge question.
Sure.
How do we determine God's will for our lives? And I think ultimately that comes down to prayer. Coming back, humbling yourself. We just talked about that in the previous episode. Humbling yourself before God, making sure that you're getting your own selfish desires out of the way. That's the whole context here.
Yep.
By the way, is you've got to do a check, because I think sometimes we believe that we're doing God's will, or we believe, because, of course it would be good for me to win the lottery, right? And then I would give so much to the needy people in the church. Why would God, those types of things. So we can genuinely fool ourselves and deceive ourselves. And James has talked about that as well. And so I think, how do we first of all, get that out of the way. Get those selfish desires, get our flesh out of the way, get the influence of the world out of the way, which is very difficult, right? The world is constantly trying to convince us through commercials and you need this car, or you need these clothes, or this furniture, or this vacation, whatever it may be. So how do we eliminate our own selfish desires, the distractions of the world, and even the enemy tempting us in certain ways? And really, if we can set that aside and we humble ourselves, we come before God, draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. We just talked about that in the last episode. Then I think that sets us up to say, okay, God, now direct me. Now, how he does that, I think he can do that through circumstances in our lives. I think he can do that through wise counsel, other trusted individuals. I think you definitely have to be on your knees before God in prayer. I believe he can speak to us. I believe sometimes the impressions we get, we have to test everything, but the impressions we get, that the desires of our heart, God desires to give us the desires of our heart if they're in line with his will. And there we have it, right? If the Lord wills, we will do this and that. And so I think there are a lot of ways that we can discover that. But the primary way is, first of all, to submit to God, to resist the temptations of the flesh and the world and the evil one, and then say, okay, God, here are the options. And I think God guides us as we move forward. We don't just sit there, okay, I'm waiting for God to, is it door number 1, door number 2, door number 3? It's sort of like, no, we get moving, right? Easier to steer the car when it's in motion, kind of do. You get moving, and then God directs as we go. He will make it clear that this is his will. And of course, there are bigger questions to ask with regards to spiritual gifting. How has God gifted me? What personality has God given me naturally? I believe God gives us certain traits, certain strengths, certain weaknesses. We have spiritual gifts. We have passions. We have abilities. We have our personality. We have past experiences. God never wastes a hurt, so maybe he wants us to move in this direction because we have an experience here. I've been a pastor for 35 years, so I'm well equipped to mentor younger pastors because of that. And so part of God's will for my life moving forward now in my 60s is to reach down to those who are younger and minister to them. So I think all of those things need to be taken into consideration when you're talking about God's will. So you see, it's a big topic. It's not an easily answered topic. If someone says, Bryan, what is God's will for my life? Yeah, there's a lot there. And I just unpacked probably about 10%. 20%.
Yeah, no, but that's good, and it's practical and it's rational.
Right.
I usually tell people God's will for your life is not to ask me this question. And then,
no, that's a quick way out of that counseling session.
yeah. I'm all about efficiency around here.
That's good.
Yeah. So one thing that I try to, I as you do, that just for people listening to this and they're still like, okay, well, I don't know if I should do this or this. Think about the W's, right? God's will. Usually if we can locate God's wisdom in his word, we kind of figure out where his will is, and the will, the desire is not a treasure map. It's not the thing that you find and then it leads you to your own desires, like you said, right? And so we think God's will is like, whatever the path to the least resistance of getting what I want. And that's not what it is at all. I mean, in 1 Thessalonians, what is it, chapter 4, around verse, the beginning of verse 4, this is your, fellow, this is your will. This is the Lord's will, your sanctification. But then it's a specific thing that you would abstain from sexual immorality. So let's not box God in with what his will is for us. Here in the James passage, it's more like, if God wills, we're just going to live. I mean, that's actually what it says. Like, we will live and we will do this or that. Like, so we're giving to the one that can save and destroy. We had just seen that earlier in chapter 4. We're open-handed with God here. Whatever you want for my life, that's what I want for my life. Because will is one. There's a lot of semantic overlap there. And so James now points out the problem, but now you are boasting in your pretense or your arrogance. Well, what is the arrogance? Well, it's earlier in the passage. You'd be amazed at how many people read so fast, they go, oh, well, how do I boast in my arrogance? Well, the arrogance is saying, hey, I'm going to go do this or that, and I'm going to be so arrogant that I'm not even going to consult the creator of all things on what they want me to do.
Yeah.
I'm not going to ask, hey, do I need to be acting out true religion at the end of chapter 1? Do I need to be taking care of the poor or the widow right now? Do I need to be giving money away? Do I need to be helping the poor believer that comes into the gathering to be welcomed and loved and cared for instead of sitting him in some shameful place? Hey, God, do I need to make sure that that my faith is alive and active before people? Hey, God, I need heavenly wisdom, right? So this boasting, whenever we decide we make our own plans and we don't consult God, think about being a vapor and think about being a creature and think about being clay for the potter. And now we're going to say, we're going to do whatever we want. So I understand why James is like, hey, this is not good. This is evil, right? Because earthly plans come from earthly wisdom, and earthly wisdom comes from a demonic place. And that's his whole bit in 3:13. So,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. One of the things that is striking me right now is, we're talking about a lot of things related to God's will in neutral areas. But I can tell you that God's will is certainly very clearly spelled out when it comes to commands in the scripture of what to do and what not to do. So is it God's will that I should steal from this business? No. Some things are very clear. Any sin is obviously outside of the will of God by definition.
Sure.
And so the scriptures have given us lots to say with regards to don't do this, do that. And also, well, is it God's will for me to give? Yeah. I think the scripture is pretty clear about that. Now, how much? I believe in grace giving. I think the more you give, the more God's going to bless you. That's just kind of the way it works. But it is God's will that you should give. Is it God's will that I should serve? Yes. Is it God's will that I should pray? Yes. I mean, the list goes on and on. So God has outlined the general principles for his will very clearly in the scriptures. And sometimes people will say, well, I don't know if that's really God's will for me. And so I think coming to the scriptures first, and then you get into these other areas where it's a little bit different, right? God's will for you and your life and what you're going to do today, tomorrow, this week is going to be different than God's will for my life. And that's where, as you were saying, prayer comes into play. The old saying, a day without prayer is a boast against God, because you're not going to the author of life. And so what he says here is, if this Lord's will, we will live and do this or that. God will direct the this or that. I think of Jesus saying, don't worry about tomorrow, because today has enough worries of its own. Tomorrow, when you start going into tomorrow, let alone this guy here who says, I'm going to spend a year there. And man, I'm going to cash in. That's a lot. That's 365 tomorrows, or 364, I guess. 364 tomorrows that Jesus said, hey, don't worry about that. Let's just focus on being in tune with God today. And so, I don't know, I kind of see this as, man, every day we ought to be praying, God, what is your will for me today? And then pay attention. Because I think God brings things our way that we might not have mapped out. And I think there's a little bit of that here, that we want to map it all out.
Oh, yeah.
I've got it. I got up at 7 a.m. Whenever I got up. I made this list. Here's
Was it
here's
God's
the list.
will that I rose at 7?
Yeah, well, depends on if you're a night owl or a morning person. Yeah. I think it's God's will that we stay up later at night and get up later. But, different people.
But to your point, that's what we do.
Yes, we do.
And to put another spin on what you're saying, I mean, every imperative in the Bible is God's will, is God's desire.
Yeah.
And so what he cares about may not be what we care about. He may not actually care that much about what job we do, but what we do at the job we have.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
You know, and so we got to be very careful that our will doesn't become his will in our own minds, because he's given us all kinds of things to be about. Jesus summed it up in Matthew 6:33, which is on the tail end of don't worry about the, you know, tomorrow, right? Or actually right before it, of what? Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness. I mean, if we want to know what God wants, there it is. And it can look we can do a lot of different things to contribute to that. But I think, you know, what you said is really, really good. God's will isn't about being able to plan out everything that we think he wants for the next year, or everything we want. It's about every day going, God, what do you want from me? And so at the end of this, James says, hey, you're boasting in your arrogance because you don't know what your life's going to be like. And all of this kind of boasting, whether you want to believe it or not, is evil. So therefore, knowing to do good, what's the good? It's doing what God wants, and not doing it is sin. And this is the rub, right? Do we live life hoping God will allow us to do whatever we want? Or do we live life and going, I don't think it's sin, I'm going to do whatever I want, God won't really care? Or do we live life going, God, I'm open-handed before you because I don't want to sin against you, because I realize who you are and who I am?
Yeah,
and I think those are two very different ways to live.
Yeah, that's really, really good. And yeah, again, it comes back to a more specific point here. If you know the good and don't do it, then it's sin. And then other times, I don't think God's will is always just for us a singular point that we go to, and then we go to the next God will and the next God will. Yeah. I think there's freedom that we have, and at times God can say, well, you know, which direction do you want to go? That there is some freedom in that. I don't know that it's all this, you know, every step and every action. You know, do I have the mashed potatoes or the French fries? What is God's will here? You know, we can really get bogged down.
Yeah, because we whole nother episode. Do not turn will into decree.
Yeah,
they're not the same thing.
Yeah. That'll preach. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. Did God decree me to eat these mashed potatoes? And if I do not eat these mashed potatoes, I can expect a healthy dose of lightning when I
That's right. You should have had the peas, man. Or the corn or something. Yeah, exactly. So that's good. This is some rich stuff here.
Yeah, it's great.
And it's a little easier maybe to just talk about than it is to unpack. I think it speaks of that. Draw near to God and he will draw near to you, which he said earlier. It speaks of that need to walk moment by moment in fellowship with God, doing life with God and including God in our day-to-day life.
That's right.
All right. Well, I think we've kind of wrapped it up here. So thanks again for joining us on this episode of Down to Earth Theology Matters, and we'll see you next week.